You are a producer, director, writer, have been in this industry for a while and worked with major stars and probably all the best people in the industry. So I'm very honored to have you here. We know each other from when you were doing the Teresa trailer, which is amazing. But let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
You were born on a windy day. You actually started in news.
I did.
Yeah, tell me about that. How did you get started in news and how long did you do that?
I needed a job. I got a job at a local CBS affiliate in Quincy, Illinois, and as a cameraman apprentice, news cameraman apprentice, and that led to my becoming a full-blown news cameraman, and then that segued into me narrating on the weekends my own little stories that I would do at the coaching of the anchorman, who's a great guy. And Gordon Manning, the senior vice president of CBS News in New York, smiled on me, and I got to go to CBS New York and then London.
Amazing.
And it was just, that was an amazing transition.
And a very quick journey. I mean, nowadays, it just doesn't move that fast.
Yeah, and in those days, it was CBS, NBC, and ABC, and those were the only three network games in town. There were no cables, there was no CNN, there was no Fox channel.
Right.
And so the chances were so unbelievably remote that I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah. You had some extraordinary experiences, which could be a whole other show, but some that come to mind is that you were actually there in the news witnessing both presidents' assassination attempts. Tell me about that.
Gerald Ford was on, President Gerald Ford was on presidential town hall tour. And the West Coast correspondent who was supposed to get in the White House press corps plane was not able to make it and asked me to sub in. So I became the network correspondent to cover what was supposed to be a relatively boring assignment, which was Gerald Ford on his presidential town hall tour on the West Coast. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Tom Brokaw was there with NBC, and he didn't have his crew with him, as I recall. And a lot of the guys were sitting it out because, frankly, everybody was tired and a little bored. My sound man and cameraman said, hey, let's you know, he's just going to go to the state capitol, walk there with his people. And I said, no, let's go. And when we got there, as my cameraman, Danny O'Donovan, was walking backwards, shooting Gerald Ford, we were no more than 7 feet, 8 feet away from him, and I was, you know how you do, you lead the cameraman so he doesn't fall. I looked over and I saw this girl in a little Red Riding Hood outfit, and she pulled a gun out, and everything went stop action photography for me. I was like, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. I mean, this cannot be happening. And that fast, Secret Service pounced on her like a football huddle. And it was Squeaky Fromme, and she was trying to shoot the president. She didn't have any bullets in the guns, it turned out.
Really?
And so that was unbelievably strange.
Did your cameraman get that on tape?
Got it on tape, and as I recall, NBC used it because Tom Brokaw was then a correspondent, and he didn't have his crew there. That's my recollection of it. And so a lot of our footage was used by the other networks. And then the next day, Sarah Moore, who's still in prison, these people are all still in prison. We were in San Francisco, and Sarah Moore all of a sudden decided to shoot Gerald Ford. And it was, I think it was the next day, it might have been the day after. I think it was the very next day we were in San Francisco.
I think a lot of people don't
And there it was
that.
again.
Yeah.
And so.
And you were there.
I felt I shouldn't be too close to the president anymore, not bringing him any great luck. So yeah, I was there for both of those. So
an extraordinary news career. And then a transition into the world of film. And did you start with the making of, was that or the documentaries from there?
Started doing what we called in those days industrial films. Today they call them corporate videos, obviously. And one of them that I directed was for the then Gloria Marshall Figure Salons, which was headed by Sidney Craig, who later started his own with his wife Jenny, and so it became Jenny Craig. Little trivia there for you.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
But Sidney Craig, just an absolutely great guy, and Regis Philbin was the host at that time of AM Los Angeles with Cindy Garvey, later to become the national thing with that he's doing now, and Regis Philbin and I clicked. We got along well, and he saw an executive at Columbia the next day named Barry Laurie. And Barry Laurie, he told me, said, we want a journalist who also is a filmmaker, but they don't exist. And Regis said, aha, I have somebody for you. And
wow.
So I got a call from Columbia saying, come see us, and I thought it was a joke. Wouldn't you? I mean, it was like, you got to be kidding. So the first shock to me was when they actually had my name at the Guard Shack in Burbank. And the second surprise was when everybody was there, including David Beagleman, the president of the studio. I mean, they took that, which they wanted me to do, very seriously, and they wanted to do behind the scenes on the making of major motion pictures.
Which had not been done before,
I don't think
not to this extent.
I don't think it had it all, really.
Really? Wow.
I think it was an innovation that I think we were the first. I'm not certain about that. I mean, somebody, I suppose, could challenge that, but I'm pretty sure that we could. I think it was mid-'70s.
So it was in the 70s, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So Regis, it's his fault, really, that
it's his fault, and
I
have him to blame.
Career.
Great guy, love Regis Philbin.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So you started with he obviously got hired.
Yes.
And
well, they put me on a film in Malta, Midnight Express, the film that none of us knew was going to do what it did, and I did a 6 or 7 minute making of with the real Billy Hayes and with Brad Davis.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And had an absolutely fabulous experience in Malta, and I knew that this was something that I just wanted to keep doing. So I did, like, over the next 10 or 12 years, I did 40 of those for Columbia, Warner's, Disney, the old Avco Embassy with Herman Cass, and Orion.
I want to talk about some. Let's go back to Midnight Express, which was your first one.
Right.
I love that you said no one knew that this movie was going to be such a breakthrough.
Nobody ever does.
No one ever does. So
no,
you really believe that in film, you just never know what's going to hit and what's not.
Right.
And sometimes you might even think, oh, this is the one.
Well,
and it
when I was watching Alan Parker direct that film, and it was in Malta at an old fortress, because obviously they were not welcome in Turkey, where Billy Hayes had done his
time.
His prison stint there. When I saw the set, but you have to keep in mind this is the first time I'd been on a set like that, I thought, wow, this is incredible. And I walked around in awe of all of it. And the guys on my crew we were amazed, and I was just shocked at Alan Parker. I mean, I didn't know who he was. He had directed commercials for the BBC prior to that. He had done Bugsy with Jodie Foster, and
oh, sure.
and that was it. And I was just really, I just loved Alan Parker and David Putnam, who produced it later to do Chariots of Fire and all of those incredible pictures, The Killing Fields. Everything David Putnam touched turned into an Academy Award-winning epic, winning Best Picture. But those guys were great, and they sort of took me under their wing and helped me. Had a lot of guidance from a lot of incredible people, but we didn't know. I didn't know. Maybe Alan did, but I didn't know. I just thought, wow, this is great.
Tell me about working on that one and the story.
Well, Billy Hayes, what happened is I got a call from Columbia Pictures just before I left for Malta saying, we're going to send the real Billy Hayes over, who had spent 5 years in a Turkish prison before he had escaped. And we're going to send the book and the script over to you. And so I read the book on the flight to London, and then I read the script on the flight from London to Malta. And when I got there, I was introduced to the real Billy Hayes. And what they wanted me to do was make a film on the making of Midnight Express that would cover 3 things. One, Billy Hayes actually lived the experience. Secondly, he relived it when he wrote the screenplay, or wrote the book, Midnight Express. Oliver Stone wrote the screenplay.
Interesting.
That's what got him started. He won the Oscar, as you recall, for Best Screenplay, or Best Adaptation. And then they said, Peter Guber, who was the executive producer of that film, told me he would like for me to focus the film where Billy was reliving the experience a 3rd time. So we put the camera on Billy actually watching this, and he was blown away. He said it was that authentic. So that was our first heads up that very well may win an Oscar. And we didn't expect it to be Best Picture. Yeah,
which is amazing. But you know, it didn't stop with that. I mean, you've worked with the best. You've worked with Mel Gibson, Spielberg, Woody Allen. I mean, Sylvester Stallone. Tell me about these people. Who impressed you the most? What was it?
Well, I loved Mel Gibson.